Hey guys, tonight we're going to step into a mystery so quietly strange, it almost feels like a daydream someone accidentally filed into the real world. And spoiler alert, it involves a breadbox. Yes, a literal, honest-to-toast breadbox that somehow contains the blueprint for an elevator that was supposedly designed to reach the moon. You'd think it came with a side of jam and existential dread. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'm just a voice at the edge of your night, but your support helps me keep these twilight stories coming. And hey, drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is over there. I want to know which cities are still awake and who else is wandering the weird side of bedtime. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You first hear about the breadbox from a footnote in an old engineering journal, the kind only 3 people in the world have read. One of them is you now, apparently. The other 2. One's probably asleep, and the last is a retired structural engineer named Shibata Masaru, who also happens to make perfect miso soup and has been banned from several science forums for excessive speculation with structural confidence. You take the train to the outskirts of Kyoto, where the buildings are short, the air smells like old rice, and even the vending machines seem to whisper secrets. Masaru lives in a 1-story home where the wind chimes are made from old gear cogs and the mailbox says, "No bills, only ideas." He answers the door wearing socks with tiny moons on them and a shirt that says, "I designed something illegal once." Before you can even say your name, he points at your shoes and says, "You're here about the elevator." Inside, his home smells like green tea and graphite. Piled everywhere are blueprints, sketches, and what can only be described as origami made from equations. He gestures to a side table. On it sits an old, dented breadbox painted mint green. A label on it reads, "Project Uri, Vertical Transit Architecture for Lunar Proximity." Uri means ghost, Masaru explains, handing you a cup of steaming tea. Because you can't build something that defies mass and expect it to be entirely visible. You lift the lid. Inside are sheets of thick, yellowing paper, densely covered in calculations and diagrams. But here's the thing, you don't recognize the units. The measurements are not in meters, inches, or even parsecs. They're in something called kmhi, kilometers per hour per intuition. That's not a thing. But it's everywhere. Masaru says the plans were mailed anonymously to him in 1977. He found them in the breadbox one morning, sandwiched between an ad for cornflakes and a newspaper clipping about a lost cat that looked suspiciously like an astronaut. He kept them because, in his words, they felt true. Here's where it gets weirder. One of the diagrams shows a lattice tower stretching from the Pacific Ocean floor all the way into lunar orbit, roughly 384,400 kilometers tall. Except it's drawn as a loop, like a Mobius strip wrapped around Earth's rotation. Masaru calls it an elevator that doesn't go up, it goes inward until outward becomes irrelevant. You stare at a page labeled Anchor Assembly, Tidal Version. There's a material listed, spun lunar filament, that has a tensile strength chart marked Infinity, and a thermal signature that reads Self-Aware. You ask him, half joking, whether it's all a prank. He smiles like a man who's forgotten how to lie. Then he says, "I once dreamed it moved." You blink. The elevator? No. The breadbox. And here's the kicker. When physicists tried to analyze the pages years ago, every attempt to scan or photocopy them resulted in blank outputs. But when held under moonlight, they glow faintly, like emergency exit signs in the dark. No one can explain this. Not even the experts who once called the documents undeniably authored by someone who understands a physics we haven't invented yet. Some scientists believe it's an elaborate hoax. Others quietly pass the papers around academic circles like forbidden folklore. And some just refuse to talk about it at all. But Masaru, sitting in his slippers, sipping his tea, just pats the breadbox gently and says, "Maybe we were never meant to go to the moon. Maybe we were meant to call it home." You leave his house just before midnight, but the sky feels closer somehow. Thicker. like the moon is leaning in to hear what you might say next. And in your pocket, he slipped you a folded copy of the schematic. Just a copy, he said with a wink. But when you get home and hold it under your lamp, it glows. Only slightly. Only when you breathe near it. You stare at the glowing schematic for a long time that night. It's not dramatic. It doesn't hum or pulse or start drawing itself in the air like in a movie. It just glows slightly, like it's remembering you. You fold it carefully, tuck it inside an old notebook, and try to sleep. But here's the problem. Your dreams are suddenly filled with blueprints. Except instead of ink, they're drawn in stars. And instead of buildings, they show something vast. Something moving. Not toward the moon, with it. A few days later, you're on a train again, this time heading toward a coastal town on the Sea of Japan. You're chasing a name that showed up in a forum thread only 5 people ever commented on. The title was, "He Measured Gravity with His Hands." At first, you thought it was a mistranslation. But the more you dug, the more consistent the details became. A man named Yuto Tanaka, who allegedly worked on Project Uri-I, claimed he could determine mass-to-lift ratios without calculations, just by holding a scaled model of the object. You're not even sure what you're expecting, but when you find him, well, let's say you almost miss him. He's in the garden behind an old bookstore, trimming bonsai with a blade so sharp it looks imaginary. He's wiry, wearing cargo pants and a kimono top, and has the quiet smile of someone who knows things that don't belong in sentences. You explain why you're here, mentioning Masaru and the Breadbox. He nods once, then gestures for you to follow him. Inside, the shop is stacked with dusty volumes. But the back room, that's something else. There's a floating platform, small, circular, humming quietly, levitating 2 inches off the floor. No wires. No visible supports. Yuto hands you a small clay model, something vaguely tower-shaped, and tells you to place it on the platform. You do. It balances perfectly, no matter how you tilt it. "Now," he says softly. "Feel it." You hesitate, but reach out. Your fingers hover just above the model, and for a second, your bones feel pulled. Not painfully, just notably, like the object is heavier in thought than in matter. Yuto says, mass is what resists intention, but lift obeys desire. You blink. That's not in any textbook. He nods, pleased. That's why it works. He walks over to a corkboard covered in strings and index cards and gently plucks one free. It shows the same schematic Masaru had, except this one has annotations. Scribbles in pencil that read like riddles. Moon doesn't rise. Earth rotates into its path. A counterweight, belief. Length isn't height. Length is longing. You ask him how he got involved with the project. "I didn't," he says. "The project involved me." According to Yuto, the lunar elevator wasn't built like other structures. There were no formal teams, no contracts, no government logos. Just a series of callings. People across decades waking up with equations in their dreams. Or finding materials in places they shouldn't be. Like a conspiracy orchestrated by architecture itself. Then comes the detail that makes your skin tingle. Yuto opens a drawer and pulls out a strip of what looks like thread. It's silver, fine as a hair, but when he places it on the floating platform, it bends upward. It leans toward the sky. "This is what the tether was supposed to be made of," he says. "Not carbon nanotubes. Not titanium. Will." You're pretty sure he's speaking metaphorically, but the thread still hasn't fallen. "Why hasn't anyone finished it?" you ask. "If the plans were real?" Yuto looks at you, then at the ceiling, and quietly says, "Because the moon hasn't said yes yet." That's not something science can process. But the weird part is, you kind of get it. There's a pause. The model sits still. The thread continues pointing up. You realize something. These people aren't building for recognition. They're building because they remember something we forgot. Before you leave, Yuto gives you a pencil sketch. It's a side view of Earth and the moon, but with a spiral connecting them, like a staircase too polite to interrupt the sky. He says, when you start to hear the hum, follow it. You laugh nervously. What hum? He doesn't answer. And yet that night, while brushing your teeth, you pause, because somewhere, just beneath the sound of the running faucet, you do hear it. The hum doesn't go away. It doesn't get louder either, which you find almost worse. It just lingers, like a song you heard once on a bus and now can't forget, except you're not sure where it's playing from, or if anyone else can hear it. You try recording it with your phone. Nothing. You put a glass against the wall like in spy movies. Still nothing. But when you close your eyes, yep, still humming. So you do what any reasonable person in your position would do. You book a ferry to a remote island where a farmer once claimed to have grown vegetables in the shadow of a space tower. The article was printed in a now-defunct rural newsletter in 1984, and every copy was supposedly pulped after an anonymous government complaint. You found one in the archives of a UFO blog that hadn't been updated since dial-up internet was a thing. The island is small, shaped like a comma tossed carelessly into the sea. As the ferry approaches, the coastline rises like a shrug from the water, steep, green, and stubbornly quiet. There's no proper dock, just a rickety ladder nailed to a rock, and a man waiting barefoot with a straw hat and a goat named Battery. He doesn't speak much, but when you show him the newsletter clipping, he nods. Then he points toward the center of the island. You follow a path through pine trees and bamboo, your shoes crunching over sun-dried moss. The air smells like warm stone and brine. Eventually, the trees open up into a clearing. There, half sunken into the ground, is what looks like a trapdoor the size of a trampoline. It's made of dull gray metal, smooth, no hinges, no handle, no visible markings, except for one thing, the tiniest engraving, dead center. A single word, Uriai. You kneel beside it, brush away some pine needles, and knock. Yes, knock. Because that's how you were raised. When you touch it, it's cold. But not normal cold. Moonlight in a vacuum cold. Like it forgot what heat ever felt like. The goat bleats behind you. Possibly in warning. Possibly just bored. Then the farmer appears again, holding what looks like an old military flashlight. Except it doesn't shine light, it shines transparency. When he turns it on and sweeps it across the trapdoor, parts of the metal fade, revealing an interior structure, like X-ray vision through dreams. There's a shaft. It doesn't go down in a straight line. It twists, like a helix or a very polite tornado. The inside walls look like brushed titanium and something else you can't name, almost like woven ice. The farmer says one word, elevator, and another, sleepwalk. You're not sure if he's warning you or explaining how it works. The next few hours are a blur of measurements, sketches, and trying very hard not to fall in. The shaft is maybe 20 meters deep, or maybe 200. Your rangefinder refuses to cooperate, pinging back nonsense like depth variable and error, perception conflict. You lie on your stomach and stare down, and that's when you notice it. A single thread. So thin it almost isn't there. Descending through the middle of the shaft like a spiderweb made of static. You reach out. It vibrates when you hover near it. Not from wind. From something else. Something steady. Almost like orbit. This isn't just an elevator shaft. It's an anchor. And it's not abandoned. Because when you whisper, just experimentally, hello, into the shaft, the thread pulses. Once. Very gently. Like it's saying, I remember you. You freeze. You try to convince yourself it's a trick of nerves or breath or pressure. But the goat is staring too. You step back, heart pounding, unsure whether you've touched something scientific, spiritual, or somewhere in between. Maybe they're the same thing here. You ask the farmer how long it's been here. He says, longer than I've owned the goat. Which sounds ridiculous until you remember that goats can live 15 years. And this goat has cataracts. Later, when you return to the ferry, the trapdoor already hidden beneath fresh pine needles again, the humming in your ears deepens. Not louder, but closer. By now, your phone's GPS doesn't trust you anymore. It keeps recalculating, spinning, showing you inside the ocean or halfway across Mongolia, which is impressive, considering you're just standing in a tiny library tucked behind a noodle shop in Osaka. You came here chasing an artifact. A message posted on a now-deleted forum said, "If you find the console, press nothing. Just wait." That's it. No context. No name. Just a picture of a dull black panel with one button labeled Ascend. And a blurry caption, Koenji Archives, sublevel B3. So here you are. Except there is no sublevel B3 on the building's map. Just a janitor closet that smells like vinegar and regret. But a little tug on the fire extinguisher reveals something better than cleaning supplies, a concrete stairwell descending into flickering light. You descend, of course. You count the steps. 49 down, 1 turn, 27 more. Then, inexplicably, 8 up. Someone's idea of cosmic humor. You reach a door that hums softly. When you push it open, you're greeted by the faint scent of ozone and printer toner. The room is small, no bigger than a shipping container. Shelves of dusty tech manuals line the walls. Old monitors blink quietly. A cassette player loops white noise with the occasional click, like a heartbeat that forgot it was mechanical. And there it is. The console. It's not fancy. Just a sleek rectangular panel on a stand, waist high. Matte black. Minimalist. Like the future if the future were designed by monks. And yes, just one button. Centered. No instructions. No icons. No USB port. It simply reads, Ascend. You don't press it. Because you remember the message, press nothing. Just wait. So you wait. 5 minutes pass. Then 10. And then, ever so faintly, the console warms beneath your fingertips. Not hot. Not vibrating. Just warm. Like it recognizes proximity. You don't know what you expected. Lights. A hidden elevator shaft opening beneath you? A disembodied AI voice welcoming you aboard? No, it's weirder than that. The room changes. Not visually. Acoustically. The background hum, probably from those old CRT monitors, begins to harmonize. Like it's not just noise anymore. It's notes. A low A. Then a soft E. Then what sounds like a whisper but might be a number. You realize it's not a sound you're hearing through your ears, it's in your bones. The temperature drops slightly. The air smells sharper. And then, for a split second, you feel a pull upward. A literal tug. Not like gravity reversed, but like someone upstairs yanked your name. Then, stillness. The button never lights up. Never depresses. It just waits with you. And when the moment passes, the feeling evaporates. As if it didn't happen. But you're changed. Because now your fingers hum too. You scan the walls. One section has faded post-it notes in overlapping languages. Japanese, Russian, English, Korean. Even some odd glyphs that aren't in any human script. One, in the middle, catches your eye. Handwritten in blue ink. Do not repeat the mistake of Theta 6. If you press before being chosen, you're just pressing a button. Theta 6. The same codename that showed up in those astronaut transcripts you glanced at earlier. The same one Masaru circled in red. You wonder what happened to whoever did press it. You wonder if they made it. Or if they're still ascending. And then you notice the console is no longer warm. It has gone colder than before. Almost like it's waiting again. But not for you this time. Before you leave, you flip over one of the old binders. Inside is a line drawing of the Earth, with a thin tether spiraling out into space. Not straight, not mechanical. Organic. like a vine wrapping upward through time. And beside it, in tiny typewritten font, Space Elevator Prototype Suspended After Resonance Interference Incident. Status, not dismantled. Status, not found. Status, waiting. When you step outside into the daylight again, the world feels thinner, not smaller, just less opaque. You look up at the sky and catch yourself scanning for a thread. Nothing yet. But now you know what not to press. And what it might mean if, someday, the button presses you back. You don't go looking for the janitor. He finds you. It happens while you're loitering outside an old research facility in Hokkaido, sipping canned coffee and pretending not to be casing the place. The building's been abandoned since the late 90s, but the lights inside still flicker occasionally. The official story is that it was a prototype weather monitoring lab. The real story is that every employee who worked there eventually quit to live somewhere with no electricity and no clocks. A local hiker told you the janitor never left. You assumed they were being metaphorical. You assumed wrong. He's short, wearing a spotless gray uniform, and appears to glide rather than walk. When he speaks, his voice is soft, almost bored, like someone who's had the same job for way too many decades. You looking for the elevator? He asks, as if you dropped it somewhere. You say yes, which is apparently the right answer. He motions you inside, past signs that say, "Do not enter," in 3 languages and one symbol that looks suspiciously like a fish giving side eye. The air inside smells like dust and ozone. The janitor, who never gives a name, leads you down a long corridor, past doorways marked anomalous field tests and causal recalibration chamber. You point at one of the doors. Don't, he says simply. Eventually you reach a supply closet. Of course it's a supply closet. Inside, past shelves of unlabeled spray bottles and rolls of mop heads, is a bench. On the bench sits a small metallic cube the size of a toaster. The janitor knocks on it. It answers with a pulse, a soft, rhythmic vibration that doesn't match your heartbeat, but might match something else. He tells you this is an anchor core. You ask, anchor for what? For keeping the shaft stable, he replies. Before the cable was installed. Wait, there was a cable? He gives a non-committal shrug. Sort of. According to him, the elevator wasn't just a physical object. It had to sync with the Earth's magnetic field, lunar orbit, and, most mysteriously, collective intent. You can't send a body up, he explains. Not if the body's full of doubt. Apparently, in the late 70s, they tried sending animals. Mice. A cat. One very irritable parrot. The parrot didn't return, but it did learn to say, almost, before vanishing. Repeatedly. The janitor opens a drawer and pulls out a laminated sheet. It's a passenger log. But the names aren't written in any ink you recognize. They shift when you look directly at them. You recognize your own name briefly, but then it flickers and fades into a word you don't know, something between whisper and wait. You ask how old the janitor is. He says, born 1932. You stare. He doesn't look a day over 40. Time moves differently when you're near the tether, he adds, almost like it's a weather update. You ask if he ever rode the elevator. He pauses, looks up at the ceiling like it owes him money, then smiles. Maybe I never stopped. Then he hands you a map. Hand-drawn. Ink and water stains. At the bottom corner, the same symbol that was etched on the Breadbox blueprints from Chapter 1. He tells you to follow the dotted line to a cliff on the east coast. There's a viewing platform, he says. You won't see much, but you'll feel it. Then he tells you the most important rule. If you find the thread and it hums your name, don't answer right away. Why? He leans closer. Because the first name it calls is never the right one. You leave the facility, the map tucked into your jacket. As you step into sunlight, your watch ticks twice in rapid succession. Time catching up? Or time letting go? The janitor's voice echoes in your head, not like a memory, but like he's still speaking, Not everything that ascends wants to come down. You don't know what's stranger, that you believe him, or that a part of you hopes he's still riding, still ascending, forever. You don't sleep well that night. Not because anything spooky happens, there's no sudden power outage, no glowing eyes outside the window. It's just that, the stars are wrong. You lie on your back, staring through the skylight of a countryside inn, watching constellations fail to stay put. Orion's belt drifts. The Big Dipper flattens. A triangle blinks on and off like it's buffering. You check a stargazing app. It has no idea what you're looking at. The next morning, you follow the janitor's hand-drawn map to a cliff on the east coast. It's barely marked, just a weathered trail leading through tall sea grass, littered with feathers and, oddly, ball bearings. At the end of the path is the viewing platform. It's not a structure, exactly, just a ring of ancient stone, sunken slightly into the earth, like it's tired from holding something up for too long. There's no railing, no telescope, no plaque. Just a worn stone bench and a gentle wind that always blows inward, never out to sea. You sit. You wait. And that's when you feel it. A tug. Not physical. Nothing drags you. But your awareness shifts. You feel taller. No, longer. Like your thoughts have stretched a bit too far and are brushing against something cold and distant and impossibly old. You look up. There, against the daylight, a thread. Just one. So thin you think it's a hair caught in your vision. But it doesn't move when you blink. It goes up. Not diagonally. Not off into the atmosphere. Straight up. As if connected to something patiently waiting above the sky. You whisper, "Hello." Nothing answers. But the stone beneath you warms slightly. You remember the janitor's words, "Don't answer if it calls your name first." So you wait. The wind picks up. You notice something you hadn't before, faint indentations in the dirt. Not footprints. More like pressure marks from waiting. A lot of waiting. Hundreds, maybe. All in different postures. Some kneeling. Some standing. One pair of impressions seems to show someone sitting cross-legged for days. You press your hand against the stone bench and feel a vibration. Faint. Rhythmic. Like breathing, but on a scale no lungs could produce. The thread above you hums. Not your name. Not yet. Just a frequency. You match it, unconsciously. Your heartbeat slows, syncing with whatever it is. For a few seconds, you don't feel like you. You feel like a node in something vast and patient. Then the humming fades. And in its place, a voice. Not heard. Not spoken. Understood. A single phrase, passed into your mind like a folded note under a classroom desk. The cargo is not ready. You jerk back, breath sharp. Who said that? But no one's around. Just you. And the wind. And the thread. You take out your notebook, the one where you've been scribbling down all the strange names and sketches and symbols. You flip back through it. Somehow, one page is already filled. You didn't write it. It's in your handwriting, yes, but the ink is fresh. Still drying. A list of coordinates. And a title. Tether sites, known and forgotten. Beneath that, a symbol you've seen before, on the console, on the breadbox, in the janitor's log. You don't know what it means. But you know what it means. You exhale. Then, just once, you speak the name you think the elevator whispered to you back in the shaft. The thread above you shimmers. You feel it. It heard you. But it doesn't respond. Not yet. Because, according to your bones and the wind and the way the light bends slightly wrong, it's still deciding if you're ready. You stand. The sky looks normal again. But now you know better. You turn to leave the platform, and for just a moment, your shadow doesn't follow. You keep moving east. Not because anything is chasing you, this isn't that kind of story. But something might be waiting. And in stories like this, waiting is just a slower kind of pursuit. Your next destination is an unmarked field near the tip of a forgotten peninsula. It's not on any current map, but an old Soviet satellite image from 1971 showed a strange pattern of indentations there. 12 perfect circles in a spiral. The declassified image was misfiled under agricultural anomalies. You found it because someone online tagged it with, like, elevator buttons. Big ones. The journey there is mostly uneventful. A bus. Then a bike. Then a muddy path you'd hesitate to call a road, lined with bamboo that creaks like a polite haunted house. At one point, a dog watches you for an hour without blinking. You wave. It doesn't. When you reach the field, there's nothing man-made in sight. Just tall, swaying grass and a few stubborn stones arranged in vague spirals. You walk the pattern. Clockwise. Once. Twice. By the third round, your compass spins and your ears ring slightly, like you're climbing too fast in an airplane. You stop. Sit. Wait. The circles are subtle now, sunken into the ground, worn by weather and time. But something's under there. Not metal. Not stone. Absence. It's like the soil remembers being lifted. You touch the earth. It's warm. You listen. Nothing. Then, not nothing. Your fingers tingle. Like when you touch an old tube TV just before it shocks you. You squint and notice. The grass inside each circle is bending inward. Slightly. As if pulled. Not by gravity but suggestion. You dig. Just a little. An inch beneath the surface is a disc. Ceramic. Smooth. Cooled despite the warm ground. Embedded with small, looping etchings. Not words, routes. Like tram lines if the trams were metaphysical. You recognize one symbol in the center. The same sigil from the viewing platform. The same that glowed, briefly, faintly, on the elevator console. Now scratched into this strange tile, like a logo burned into time itself. You lift it. Instantly, the wind stops. The clouds above freeze. Even the insects go quiet. And then you hear it again. The hum. Not overhead this time. Below. You drop to your knees, press your ear to the earth. It's faint, but it's there. A steady, mechanical vibration, like an engine that's not supposed to be on. But it is. You look up. No sign of the thread today. Only sky. But something inside you shifts. And now, this is hard to explain. You're aware of verticality in a new way. Like your mind has acquired a sixth sense, tuned to upwardness. You feel the distance between yourself and the moon, not as a number, but as a possibility. And in that moment, you understand something. The elevator wasn't meant to take us there. It was meant to bring something back. You don't know how you know that. Only that it makes your spine itch. You rebury the disc. Not out of fear, out of respect. You're not the first to find this place, and if you're smart, you won't be the last. You leave the field just before dusk. The grass whispers something behind you. It sounds like counting, but not in a language with numbers. Back in town, you try to act normal, which, as it turns out, is harder than expected when you've recently tuned your brain to lunar elevator frequencies. The local grocery store is playing faint jazz over the speakers, and you find yourself distracted by the rhythm. Not because it's catchy, but because it's off, just enough that you realize the beat pattern matches the humming sequence from the field. Coincidence? Probably. But then the man at the checkout hands you change and says, "Watch the sky tonight. It's going to dip." You blink. What? He shrugs. Just a saying. Sure it is. You get back to your room, sit cross-legged on the tatami mat, and unroll the hand-drawn map the janitor gave you. You notice something strange. The ink near the northeast corner is darker now, as if someone retraced it with a heavier hand. That corner corresponds to where you just were, the spiral field. When you trace it with your finger, it tingles. You get the sense that this map wants to be unfolded further. But there's no seam, no extension. It's like it's holding a breath. So you try something stupid. You whisper to it, "Where next?" And it answers. Not in words, but with scent. The faintest smell of pine and ozone. A place. Coastal. Wet. Sharp. You pack your bag again. The train to the next destination is slow, outdated, and mostly empty. You share the carriage with an old woman knitting something that looks suspiciously like antenna covers. At one point, she leans over and says, "You'll need to be gentle. The tide doesn't forgive impatience." Then she hands you a boiled sweet and smiles like that explains everything. You nod politely, as one does when reality starts to fold itself into your day like origami. Hours later, you arrive at a harbor town that doesn't show up on GPS. It has no streetlights, just lanterns, and a dock made entirely of bolted-together telephone poles, stripped of wires but still humming faintly, like they remember their job. You find the house easily. It's the only one that doesn't cast a shadow. Inside is a woman, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, dressed like a marine biologist, and an antique dealer had a closet disagreement. She introduces herself as Sumi. "You're not the first," she says, handing you a mug of something dark and spicy. "But you're early." You tell her about the elevator. She doesn't blink. Instead, she unrolls a scroll. It's ancient, torn at the edges, covered in depictions of cables stretching from earth to sky, anchoring clouds, moonlight, even what looks suspiciously like Saturn. People stand at the base, holding lanterns with open bottoms. "Signal lamps," she explains. "You can't just ride the elevator. You have to be seen. Otherwise, it doesn't know you're real." You ask what happened to the last person who tried. She taps a finger against a part of the scroll that's been blackened with soot. "They got halfway. Halfway. Between gravity and memory," she adds. "Very hard to come back from that." You sip your drink in silence. Outside, the tide recedes, revealing not just sand, but tracks. Two lines, perfectly parallel, stretching far into the sea. Not made by tires. Not rails either. More like wear marks. Like something descended, then waited, then left. Sumi speaks again. "Tomorrow, we try the signal." You ask what that means. She grins. "Depends what answers." You sleep poorly again. Not from fear. From anticipation. The air smells of static and salt. And somewhere, just offshore, something hums in a language older than tides. You wake before dawn. Sumi is already outside, barefoot on the dock, adjusting a contraption that looks like a hybrid between a lighthouse lens and a church bell. It's mounted on a rotating pedestal, and she's calibrating it with the calm focus of someone tuning a violin before a very important concert. You shuffle over, still groggy. "So, this is the signal lamp?" Sumi nods. "It's not for seeing. It's for being seen." You ask how it works. She shrugs. "That's the funny part. We don't know. But it does." The tide is out, again. Farther than yesterday. The tracks are fully visible now. Grooved lines in the seabed, perfectly straight, leading to a vanishing point so far out you get vertigo just trying to follow them. You both wait. Then, just as the sun starts its slow, cautious rise, Sumi lights the lamp. It doesn't flash or flare. It chimes. A single, resonant tone, low and warm, like a bronze bowl struck in a monastery high above the clouds. You don't hear it so much as feel it in your chest cavity. Again. Then again. Each tone a call, steady and slow. The ocean responds. Not with waves, but with pattern. Ripples move inward, not outward. The water folds like origami, arranging itself into geometric reflections. The lines in the seabed begin to shimmer faintly, as if remembering something. A sound rises, not from the dock or the machine, but from beneath the sea. A mechanical click. Then a second. Then silence. Sumi whispers, "It heard us." You feel it too. Not excitement. Not fear. Just attention. Like something has turned its gaze toward you for the first time in a very long time. And it's waiting. You scan the horizon. There's nothing there. But the pressure in your ears suggests otherwise. Then it appears. Far, far out, where the water meets the sky, a glint, a shimmer, like heat waves on asphalt, but vertical. It stretches upward, impossibly far. You realize it isn't light reflecting. It's material. A line. No, the line. The tether. The elevator cable. It's thinner than you expected. More like thread than steel. But it moves slightly in the wind, and you suddenly understand that it's not designed to be seen, only used. You ask Sumi, "Is that it?" She nods. "One of them." "One." "There were 7, she says. "Now, maybe 3, maybe less. Most of the anchors are gone." She points to a metal cylinder beside the lamp. It's about the size of a thermos, covered in glyphs and dials. "This is the call key. Don't lose it. Don't drop it. Don't open it unless you're standing on the pad." You glance around. "What pad?" She smiles. "You'll know. You don't get much more than that." Sumi disappears inside to make what she calls moon-stable tea, and you're left holding the key, staring out at a glimmering line that reaches into nothingness. The lamp chimes once more. The tether shudders. And then, you see movement. Something's coming down. Not fast. Not like an elevator in a building. This is slow. Careful. Deliberate. A shape, cylindrical, dark, and long, descending along the tether with a kind of grace that suggests it's not just obeying physics. It's following instructions. Ancient ones. As it nears, the air temperature drops. The gulls vanish. And your name, only once, is whispered by the wind. Except it's not your name. Not exactly. It's a name you haven't used in years. One you almost forgot. But somehow, the tether didn't. The cylinder stops just above the water, hovering without touching. A door opens sideways, like a flower unfurling in reverse. Inside is darkness. But not empty. You feel it. A presence. Not threatening. Just expectant. Then, from the shadows within, a hand extends. It's human. Worn. Covered in symbols that pulse faintly in rhythm with the sea. The fingers curl slightly, inviting you. But they don't speak. Because they don't have to. They're waiting for you to decide. Not to enter. To remember. You don't step forward immediately. You just stare. Because the hand, the one extended from inside that hovering vessel, is familiar. Not because you've seen it before, but because it moves the way you do. Like it knows the rhythm of your breath before you even inhale. And on the wrist, just barely visible under the sleeve of a strange uniform that looks halfway between a cosmonaut suit and a monk's robe, is a faded scar. Shaped like a crescent. You have the same one. Your mind scrambles for rational explanations. Coincidence, projection, dream logic. But the air is too sharp, the sound too crisp. This isn't a dream. The hand beckons again. This time, you step forward. You're still holding the call key. You glance down, and the dials have shifted on their own, aligning to form a symbol you've seen once before, on the tile you unearthed in the spiral field. The elevator accepts your approach without sound. No hiss of hydraulics, no dramatic music cues. Just the soft click of boots on metal as you step into the dim interior. The moment you do, your ears pop. Not from pressure, but from transition, like you've passed through a curtain stitched with rules. Inside, it's bigger than it should be. The walls curve away at angles that make no architectural sense. The hand withdraws into the shadow, but you sense the presence still, behind a panel, or perhaps beneath the floor. Then the door closes. Softly, the hum returns, and the floor doesn't move, or rather, it moves without motion. You don't rise. You don't fall. You simply become aware that your location is changing. Like your coordinates are being rewritten instead of your body being lifted. Your stomach doesn't lurch. Your mind does. A panel flickers to life. On it, 7 glyphs. One is glowing. The same symbol on the call key. The others pulse faintly. You reach out, instinctively, and the interface reacts to your presence, shifting like oil on glass. No buttons, no screens. Just intent, interpreted. As you focus on the glowing symbol, a new window appears. It shows the Earth. But not as it is now. As it was. You recognize certain coastlines, but others are gone. Some reshaped. There are structures that look like antennas the size of mountains, and clouds that move in suspiciously geometric patterns. And then you see them. The other elevators. Lines, some faint, some broken, one clearly still active, extending from different points on Earth into orbit. You count 5. But none of them are aligned like this one. They're diagonal, arcing. This one, vertical. Purely, unnaturally, defiantly vertical. Something about that makes your pulse slow. Like a lullaby made of geometry. The vessel begins to shift again. You don't feel it, but the interface confirms it. You're rising now. Not quickly. Not linearly. And definitely not alone. Shapes pass by the walls, some large, some not. A flicker of shadow with too many joints. A ripple of light that seems to observe you without eyes. You stare, mesmerized, until the cabin dims slightly, as if gently suggesting, don't look too long. So you close your eyes. And for a moment, you remember something impossible. A moment on a beach. A silver thread in the sky. A girl, no, you, holding up a paper crane, whispering something like a prayer. And the thread pulsing once, in reply. You open your eyes. The vessel is now completely silent. Ahead of you, a door. Not the one you entered through. This one is triangular. It opens. Behind it, a chamber, lined with plants that don't exist in any botany book, all glowing with faint bioluminescence. In the center, a chair. Not mechanical, wooden, but old. And somehow, it's waiting. There's a feeling here. Not fear. Not even awe. Just recognition. As if some part of you knew this moment was coming. As if this wasn't the first time you've ridden this elevator. As if you've never left. And the voice that greets you next isn't external. It's inside your head. But warm. Familiar. It says, welcome back. Let's begin. You sit. Not because you're told to, not because the chair demands it, but because your body moves on instinct. Like it's answering a memory that's older than you are. The chair is warm. It shouldn't be. It creaks softly under your weight, not from strain, but from recognition. As though it remembers you. You rest your hands on the arms and realize they fit perfectly. Your fingers slide into grooves smoothed by time, or by repetition. Then the room exhales. The bioluminescent plants sway, not from wind, but in unison. Synchronized. As if they're listening to the same song you can't hear yet. The light dims slightly, and the walls ripple with faint constellations, moving, changing, rearranging themselves. One constellation draws your attention. It's not one you recognize from Earth's skies. It's a spiral with an odd offset star at its edge. You feel like you've seen it before, in the spiral field, in the glyphs on the key, maybe even once in a dream you forgot when you woke. The voice returns. Not from outside. Not from within. Just here. Do you remember what we built? You try to answer, but no words form. You don't need language, it continues. Memory is older than words. Then something shifts in your mind. Not a revelation. A return. Images flash, layered with feelings. You standing at the base of a great structure. No, a tether, running your hand along a cable that hums like a tuning fork. You, helping others lift anchor stones into alignment. You, sketching diagrams in the sand while a child looks on, mimicking your every motion. The same scar on their wrist. You were part of it. Not an observer. A builder. And not alone. Why did we stop? You whisper. The voice answers, because you doubted. A pause. Because Earth forgot. Another pause, slower. Because the sky grew quiet. You inhale sharply, and the air tastes like lightning. The chair begins to rise. Not through the floor, but through perception. As if it's lifting you into a memory that doesn't obey gravity. You see blueprints now, hanging in the air. Schematics drawn in ink that glows faintly when you focus. You recognize some of the components. Carbon ribbon threads braided with crystal memory lattices. Signal balancers made from beetle shell and gold leaf. Cores powered not by fuel, but by attention. Attention is the currency here. Belief, directed and sustained, turns gears. You ask, is that why it failed? No, the voice says. It still works. You're here. The room shifts again. You're not in the chamber anymore. You're on a platform, open, circular, suspended in nothingness. Below, Earth, turning slowly, clouds dragging across continents like lazy brushstrokes. Above, stars, but closer than they should be. You realize something strange. You're not in orbit. You're between. Not space. Not Earth. A liminal slice. The elevator isn't a vehicle. It's a bridge. And you're walking across it with your mind. The voice softens. Few ever reach this point. Fewer remember why they came. You ask, and if I do, you'll choose. Choose what? Whether we finish it. You look down. The Earth is familiar, but distant. Like a home you left before the paint dried. The platform beneath your feet begins to form symbols, shifting under your steps like sand rearranging itself to match your weight. It's adapting, preparing. Then the voice fades. Not because it ends. Because now it's inside you. You're no longer a guest. You're a key. The chair, the room, the tether, none of them were machines. They were memories you once left behind. And now, you've reclaimed them. The sky flickers. You hear another chime, far away, another elevator calling. A different signal. A different traveler. You are not alone in this network. You never were. The stars above don't twinkle here. They shimmer, rhythmically, like heartbeat monitors in the distance. You try to make sense of their patterns, but they refuse to hold still long enough. One moment they form arcs, the next they reorganize into something that looks suspiciously like a skeletal diagram of a jellyfish, or a city grid, or both. You're still on the platform, or at least, something like it. But now it feels less like you're standing on something and more like you're balanced within something. As if the elevator is not a location but a field. A frequency. Then you notice something new. A door. Where there wasn't one before. It isn't floating. It isn't attached to anything. It just is, like a painting hung in midair. Carved wood, deep red, and humming. Not visually, but emotionally. A door that remembers every hand that's ever touched it. You reach out, hesitantly. The surface is smooth, almost warm. You push. It doesn't swing open. It folds, silently, like silk parting. And on the other side is not space, not sky, but a room full of people. They turn. They smile. You freeze. Because every single one of them looks familiar. Not because you've met them, but because you've been them. In dreams. In flashes. In other lives you convinced yourself were just imagination. One of them steps forward. A man, maybe 70s in age, though his eyes are young. He has your posture, your exact cadence of breath. And when he speaks, it's your voice, or close enough to jolt something loose in your spine. You made it, he says. Took longer this time. You whisper, "What is this place?" He gestures broadly. Memory hall. Or coordination room. Depends what century you're sinking to. You blink. Wait, coordination of what? He grins. Reconstruction. Of the tower. Of the net. Of what we were before the forgetting. Around the room, others nod. One woman types at a device made of ceramic keys and ink streams. A child, levitating small brass tokens in perfect orbit around her head, glances your way and smirks. Another person sketches a star chart on water, and the ripples align as if obeying their pencil. You ask the only reasonable question, "Am I dreaming?" "No," the old you says. "But dreams are how we usually start remembering." He walks with you to the center of the room. There's a table. On it, a map. Not of Earth. Not of the solar system. But of routes, vertical, sideways, spiraled. Some are solid lines. Some are broken. Some fade as you watch them. "These are the elevators," he says. You ask, "Why are so many fading?" He looks at you, gently. Because attention drifts. Belief collapses. Anchors dissolve when we stop looking. You stare at one line. It's blinking. Yours. The one you rode. It's still lit, you say. Because you're still inside it. A soft chime fills the air. All heads turn. A new route just reappeared. One no one expected. They murmur among themselves. The old you nods solemnly. "That's your signal," he says. You ask, "What does that mean?" "It means it's time." "For what?" He places a hand over your chest. It's not symbolic. The call key you'd forgotten you were holding reappears between your ribs, flickering slightly. You decide which future gets rebuilt, he says. "We only help remember how." The table ripples again. And now you understand. This isn't about one tower, or one trip, or one elevator lost to history. It's about the entire architecture that once connected minds across centuries, not through wires or satellites, but through resonance, through intent. And now that you're here, remembered and remembering, they can begin again. But only if you agree. And all it takes is staying just 1 second longer. You don't say yes out loud. You just stay. And somehow, the room knows. The table pulses once in quiet acknowledgement, and a section of it opens, not mechanically, but like paper folding itself. Beneath it is something you never expected, a seed. Metallic, palm-sized, and covered in the same glyphs you've seen all along this journey. Only this time, they're moving, rearranging as you look, like they're responding to your breath. "You'll carry this," the older version of you says. You hesitate. What is it? It's the blueprint. Not just of the elevator. Of you. Your memory, your pattern, your resonance. The whole path, encoded. You glance around the room. Everyone else is watching, but not with pressure. More like hope. Quiet, well-practiced hope. Like this isn't the first time they've done this. Like they know it might not work, but still, they wait. Your fingers brush the seed. The moment you make contact, the glyphs stop moving. They settle. You're no longer just watching this story unfold. You're now part of the mechanism. The moment feels weightless. The old you places a small case in your hands, a container that feels heavier than it looks. You suspect it's not due to mass. Some part of you knows it contains time itself, and that if you lose it, it doesn't just disappear. It unhappens. A nearby panel lights up. It displays a countdown, 7:24 and ticking down. You ask, "What's that?" "A return window," someone says. The elevator phase locks with Earth for 8 minutes at a time. You either ride it back, or wait the next century. The room doesn't laugh. Because it's not a joke. You take a deep breath. The elevator, the network, the whole memory architecture, it's all here. It's all real, but it's also fragile. It needs someone to carry it back. You glance at the countdown, 6:17. The others begin folding the room down. The star mapping child clicks her fingers and the constellations return to her sketchbook. The map collapses into a flat square and disappears into a drawer. The hall you walked through fades behind you like fog dissolving at dawn. Even the man who looks like you begins to dim. Will I forget this? You ask. Not all of it, he says, but enough that you'll wonder if it was a dream. Is there a way to remember more? Yes, he says. Plant the seed. You raise your eyebrows. Literally. Literally, he smiles. Preferably somewhere overlooked. Forgotten. Elevators like those kinds of places. You nod, even though your hands are shaking. The countdown ticks past 4:32. Will I see you again? You always do, he says. But you never recognize me at first. As you step back toward the triangular door, the platform reforms around you. Now stable, now ready. You hold the case close. The moment you do, your vision tilts slightly, like the world just reminded you that gravity is optional here. The lights pulse once. A low hum, different from the earlier ones, starts building. The seed is active now. The glyphs are glowing. The return journey begins. But this time, it's not linear. It threads you through time like a needle through fabric, stitching the future back into place. You don't see stars this time. You see doors. Hundreds. Thousands. All unopened. All waiting. Each one labeled with a name you've almost forgotten. Or maybe, a name you haven't been given yet. The elevator hums louder. You grip the case tighter. And the world begins to reassemble. Not just around you, but through you. The hum becomes a tone. The tone becomes silence. And the silence becomes earth. You land with your feet in the sand. Not metaphorically. Not as a dream image. Actual sand. Fine, cool, and just a little damp, like a beach in the early hours before the sun thinks about rising. You're not sure how long you've been gone. But the sky's still dark. And the air smells like rain that changed its mind halfway through falling. Somewhere nearby, a frog chirps lazily, as if reminding you this is real. This is Earth. You check your hands. The seed's still there. The container still warm. But now, the glyphs are dim. Not gone, just waiting. Like they know this isn't the time for revelation. It's time for re-entry. You walk. No one's waiting. No applause. No lights. No mysterious figures in robes handing you a towel and a thermos of soup. Just you, a pair of slightly wet shoes, and a world that has no idea you left. It's oddly comforting. But you know what you have to do. You don't remember everything. Not names, not coordinates. But your hands do. Your feet do. You walk without choosing. You let your breath guide you. Eventually, you reach a spot. It's not special by any logical definition. It's not high up or hidden away or buzzing with secret radiation. It's just an empty patch between two buildings that no one seems to notice. The concrete is cracked. A pipe leaks quietly into a gutter. Someone's dropped a playing card on the ground, Queen of Clubs. You kneel. And gently, like you're tucking in a child, you press the seed into the soil beneath the weeds. Nothing dramatic happens. No lights, no chimes, no psychic download. Just a stillness. Like the universe inhaled and forgot to exhale. And somehow, that's the sign. You sit back, brushing dirt from your fingers. Something inside you wants to cry. But not because you're sad. Because you remembered. Because you carried something across time and set it down exactly where it needed to be. Like placing a key into a lock you'd forgotten existed. You stand up, stretch, and turn around to leave. But before you go, you look back. And for just half a second, you see a thin line of silver light running from the crack in the concrete upward. so faint you might have imagined it, cutting through the sky, disappearing into the stars. A vertical echo, a memory beginning again. And in that instant, you realize something. The elevator never really needed to reach the moon. That was just the pitch. It was never about the destination. It was about building a memory bridge between what we are and what we could remember being. You walk home under a sky that seems to hum softly. And somewhere far above, where blue fades into black, a pattern of stars reshapes itself for the first time in 100 years. Weeks pass. Or maybe it's months. You stop counting days in the usual way. Something in you feels subtly realigned. Not like you're floating or glowing or hearing whispers from outer space. More like you remember the names of certain winds. Or the way light changes just before something impossible happens. You go back to your life. Sort of. But you notice the cracks now. Not the bad kind, but the kind that let other realities peek through. You walk by street lamps that flicker in Morse code rhythms. You pass strangers who glance at you with expressions like, "Do I know you from somewhere strange?" And that place you planted the seed? It changes. Not dramatically. One day the pipe's been sealed. The weeds are growing in patterns that look suspiciously intentional. Someone even painted over the graffiti nearby, replacing it with a single symbol, a glyph, faint but familiar. You don't touch it. You just nod. Because now, the elevator isn't just some forgotten megaproject with delusions of lunar grandeur. It's a network, a system that remembers itself only when someone chooses to carry a piece of it forward. You kept your promise. And the architecture is waking up again. But not all at once. It comes in fragments, dreams, gut feelings. A sentence in a book you swear didn't say that the first time you read it. You start writing things down, sketching the glyphs on napkins. You catch yourself humming the tones from the platform without realizing it. Sometimes, when your eyes glaze over in a meeting or while waiting for the kettle to boil, you'll feel the elevator still moving, like you're in two places at once. Which, technically, you might be. Then one morning, you get mail. No name. Just a sealed envelope with a single phrase inside. Remember the second seed. You don't remember planting a second seed. You don't remember anything about it. But you believe it instantly. Because that's how it works, right? The network doesn't rely on logic. It runs on trust. You pocket the note and walk outside. The sky looks a little off. Not bad. Just textured, like it's holding something back. A thin silver streak hovers near the horizon, flickering in and out of view like a memory that hasn't fully loaded. You smile. You're not surprised. Not anymore. You sit on a park bench. Or maybe a rooftop. It's unclear, and it doesn't really matter. The city hums around you, unaware of the elevator returning to phase. And somewhere deep inside, you know the next phase won't require steel cables or lunar modules. It will need dreamers. People who trust in unseen maps. Who sketch star charts on cafe receipts and whisper strange words in their sleep. People like you. And just before the scene fades, a child walks by. She stops, looks at you, and in her hand is a small object, shiny and humming slightly. She holds it out. It's a seed. Not yours. A new one. Do I give this to you? She asks, blinking slowly. You look at her, and something deep in your spine, a memory nested in a memory, clicks open like a door. You take the seed. You smile. Not yet, you say. But soon. The sky shifts again. A light hum returns. And the elevator, somewhere unseen, opens another door. You sit quietly now. Not because there's nothing left to say, but because silence has started to make sense in a new way, like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that hasn't been invented yet. The air around you softens. Somewhere nearby, someone is turning off a light. Someone else is tucking themselves in, unaware that a memory once rode an invisible elevator straight through their city, brushing against their rooftop in the quietest way possible. And you're still here. But also, not quite. Because a part of you is forever stitched into that story. Into the folds of a plan almost too large to be understood, yet too intimate to be denied. You still have the seed. Not physically, maybe, but in the way you now pause when you hear certain sounds, or notice certain shadows, or feel like a door you've never seen before might just open if you knock with your left hand and hum the right note. There's no need to rush. The elevator doesn't forget. It just waits. So breathe slow. Let the noise outside melt into soft nothing. Let your limbs sink deep into the mattress. You've already taken the ride. You've already come back. And the next journey, it'll find you when you're ready. For now, close your eyes. Feel the hum. You're safe. You're home.